I parked my 2015 Subaru Outback between a gleaming black Range Rover Velar and a pearl-white Lucid Air Sapphire. Their doors clicked shut with an air of practiced, expensive superiority that always seemed to fill the Greenwich air around the Vance residence. Mine, the Subaru's, closed with a quiet, unassuming thud, a sound that mirrored my own presence in this family, barely acknowledged, easily dismissed. This family dinner, a summons from Mom, was one I couldn't entirely refuse. It was ostensibly to celebrate Julian's promotion to partner at Whitman and Sterling and Chloe's recently announced pregnancy. Reasons for them to preen, reasons for me to brace myself. As I drove, the familiar weight of dread had settled in, accompanied by the usual reel of unwelcome memories. There was the sting of Mom's voice when I'd excitedly told her I'd gotten into Stanford. Stanford, she'd scoffed. Olivia, darling, what on earth for? A girl doesn't need to go gallivanting off to California. A local community college would be perfectly adequate for someone like you. Financial support, naturally, had been out of the question. I paid my own way through Stanford, every last cent. Graduating at the top of my computer science master's program through sheer grit and a constellation of part-time jobs. Then there was the sharp pang of humiliation at Julian's Harvard Law School graduation. The photographer, orchestrating the perfect Vance family portrait, had gestured vaguely in my direction. "You, dear," he'd said, not unkindly but dismissively, "could you just shift a little to the side?" Pushed to the periphery, literally and figuratively. Tonight, I was 36. I wore a simple navy dress, a favorite pulled from my Seattle closet, no ostentatious labels, no flashy designer, just clean lines and an attempt at quiet dignity. I'd come alone, as always. No date, no entourage, just me, just Olivia. Mom's text from earlier still echoed in my mind, "Be on time, Olivia." This is an important evening for Julian and Chloe. The imposing front door of the Vance house was already open, spilling light and the murmur of voices onto the manicured driveway. Through the marble entryway, I could hear their laughter, sharp, polished, dripping with the kind of casual affluence that always set my teeth on edge. I stepped inside. The enormous crystal chandelier in the dining room still cast that same opulent, golden glow across the long, gleaming mahogany table. 16 ridiculously ornate chairs, an arsenal of crystal and silver, the rich scent of what was probably, inevitably, veal and some expensive wine. Nothing ever truly changed here, except, perhaps, me. Or so I hoped. Eleanor Vance, my mother, presided at the head of the table, a queen on her throne, elegant, impeccable. Her expression a carefully curated mask of benign matriarchy that never quite reached her cold eyes. She turned her head with deliberate slowness when she saw me enter. A smile touched her lips, but it was the Vance family special, all warning, no warmth. Well, she said, her voice carrying just enough for the catering staff to overhear, "the prodigal, well, Olivia arrives." A beat of silence, then a few polite, yet clearly amused, chuckles. From my brother Julian, the newly minted partner at WNS, his tie perfect, his smile sharper than any legal argument. From cousin Marcus Thorne, Harrington Capital's self-proclaimed ace trader, always ready with a booming opinion. From Chloe Vance, Julian's wife, resplendent and already radiating smug maternal glow. The woman who once earnestly advised me that true success for a woman was simply a matter of marrying well. I stood there for a moment, my hands clasped loosely at my sides, a familiar knot tightening in my stomach. And then, right on cue, it came. "Honestly, Olivia," Mom said, her voice a clear, cold pronouncement that cut through the low hum of conversation, "your pursuits are becoming something of an embarrassment to this family." No one gasped, they just offered subtle nods of agreement or suddenly found their water glasses fascinating. I didn't answer. I didn't flinch, though the old wounds throbbed. I just walked forward and took the last empty seat, predictably placed between a decorative fern no one wanted to sit next to and a silver platter piled high with bread rolls no one had yet offered me. Across the table, Julian raised his wine glass, a smirk playing on his lips. "To upholding standards," he said, his gaze flicking pointedly in my direction. I didn't lift my glass. No one seemed to notice. Or perhaps they did, and that, as always, was precisely the point. I glanced down at my wristwatch, a simple, elegant piece, a gift from my grandmother, its leather band worn, its hand still ticking faithfully. Still mine. And I wondered, not for the first time, why I continued to subject myself to this. There's a photograph tucked away somewhere in this house, a relic from Julian's Harvard Law graduation. The entire Vance clan was there, meticulously arranged on the sweeping front lawn, a tableau of pastel dresses, pearl necklaces, and self-congratulatory smiles. Champagne flutes glinted in the sun as they spoke of legacy and connections. I stood at the very edge of the frame, not quite centered, not quite belonging, not quite welcome. I was 23 at the time, I think. I just completed my master's in computer science from Stanford, a world-class institution, but not Ivy League in the way the Vances understood or valued prestige. There were no celebratory dinners for my achievements. I'd managed to secure a junior research position at a small biotech firm, focusing on data analysis for medical research. I'd mentioned it during a strange Sunday brunch, hoping for perhaps a flicker of interest, a crumb of acknowledgement. Mom had blinked slowly, a carefully plucked eyebrow arched. "That sounds rather niche, Olivia," she'd said, her tone implying it was also rather pointless. Dad, Arthur Vance, hadn't even bothered to look up from his Wall Street Journal. "You know, Olivia," he'd mumbled, his attention still on the stock market report, "it's not too late to reconsider. Julian tells me Georgetown Law still has openings for their summer intake. We could make a few calls." The unspoken message was clear, my path was a disappointment, a deviation from the approved Vance trajectory. I remember nodding politely, a tight smile fixed on my face, as I slowly, deliberately, folded my linen napkin. The next day, I'd started seriously planning my escape, not from a place, but from an expectation. No dramatic confrontation, no tearful farewells, just a quiet, resolute distancing. I didn't slam any doors. I didn't need to. I'd packed my life into 2 suitcases and taken a bus, not literally, but metaphorically, away from their suffocating world, carrying a dream they couldn't comprehend, let alone believe in. That was the true genesis of Ethelred's systems. It began in a cramped Seattle apartment with unreliable plumbing and exceptionally good coffee. I coded on a second-hand laptop, fueled by caffeine and a burning desire to prove something, mostly to myself. I pitched my ideas to indifferent faces on grainy video calls. I was told no more times than I could count, 57, to be exact, before one woman, a brilliant former public health official turned angel investor, saw something in me, in my vision, that my own family had consistently failed to perceive. She gave me $200,000, a lifeline, and this very wristwatch, the one I wore now. "You'll need something to measure time accurately, Olivia," she'd said, her eyes kind but shrewd. "Not just the hours in a day, but the milestones you achieve." I'd worn it every single day since. When Ethelred Systems landed its first significant grant from a major health foundation, I'd sent Mom and Dad a brief, factual email. Not seeking approval, just informing them. Mom's reply arrived 3 weeks later, a typed, glacially polite, and astonishingly brief note. "Olivia, we trust you will exercise discretion. Please refrain from associating the Vance name with any venture that may not endure." No congratulations. No phone call. Just a dismissal, elegantly penned on expensive stationery. I kept that note. I didn't frame it, but I remembered every word. Every time a potential partnership dissolved, I'd recall its chilling message. Every time a funding round seemed on the verge of collapse, I'd hear her voice. And every time Ethelred Systems defied their silent expectations, growing from a fledgling idea to a company valued first at $10 million, then $100 million, then into the billions, I'd remember that note. It wasn't a compass guiding me toward them, but a stark reminder of how far I'd traveled, and how much further I still intended to go, on my own terms. I rarely returned to Connecticut. Not for birthdays, which they often forgot anyway. Not for most holidays. Not even when Chloe gave birth to her first child. Or when Dad had his mild health scare and Julian delivered a moving speech at some charity gala about the enduring strength of family unity, a unity I'd never truly felt part of. They seldom extended genuine invitations, and I had long ago stopped asking. Until tonight's summons. Now, sitting at their opulent table, caught between their knowing smirks and their gleaming silverware, I looked at the faces that had once, and perhaps still, dismissed me as a failure, an eccentric, a disappointment. And I remembered. I wasn't here for their validation. I was here for something else, something quieter, yet infinitely heavier. Something that felt, I hoped, like closure. Dinner, as I'd silently predicted, was veal. It was always veal when Mom wanted to make a statement of traditional, unyielding formality. Veal with some elaborate wild mushroom risotto, served on the bone-white china, each piece meticulously rimmed in gold. The very same set Mom had triumphantly flown in from Milan the year I turned 17. I remembered it vividly because that was also the year she'd completely forgotten my birthday. A fact that stung far more than the veal itself mattered. I hadn't eaten veal in years. I picked at the edge of it with my fork, a silent, solitary diner in a crowded room. Julian, naturally, was holding court, mid-anecdote about some high-stakes M&A arbitration that had teetered on the brink of collapse before he, single-handedly, of course, swooped in to save the multi-million-dollar deal. He wielded his fork like a gavel and wore his ego like a bespoke suit. Chloe, his adoring wife, chimed in with her impeccably timed chorus. He's the youngest partner in Whitman and Sterling's entire history, you know. The pride in her voice practically shimmered, reflecting off her diamond earrings, each sparkle a tiny chandelier of its own. Across the table, Cousin Marcus was pontificating, his voice several decibels louder than necessary, lecturing a captive and largely uninterested audience on why his personal portfolio manager was disastrously wrong about emerging market trends. He gesticulated with his wine glass, a conductor leading an orchestra only he could hear, sloshing a little Bordeaux onto the pristine tablecloth. Mom sat at the head of the table, a serene smile fixed on her face, nodding sagely, orchestrating the entire performance, guiding the rhythm of conversation as she always did. When her gaze finally landed on me, it was accompanied by that thin, knowing smile. "Still, working in technology, are you, dear?" she inquired, her tone dripping with condescension. "Not running your company, not developing groundbreaking AI medical systems, not even a polite, 'How is Ethelred Systems doing?' Just working in technology." As if I were tinkering with a home computer in a dusty attic. I nodded, keeping my voice even. "Yes, Mom. Still building systems." That, apparently, was enough to pique a sliver of their carefully rationed interest. Marcus leaned across the table, nearly knocking over a water goblet. "What kind of tech stuff, Olivia?" he boomed, scattering crumbs. "Apps? Websites? You dabbling in that crypto nonsense?" I could have told them that Ethelred Systems diagnostic AI was currently being integrated into systems used by the Global Health Initiative, potentially impacting millions of lives. I could have mentioned our recent successful bid for a federal medical agency contract to improve national health screening protocols. I didn't. Before I could formulate a polite, concise, and utterly uninformative reply, Julian jumped in, a nostalgic, yet patronizing, smile on his face. "Oh, I remember when Olivia used to lock herself in her room for hours as a kid, glued to that ancient Dell desktop. We all thought it was just a phase," Mom added, a wistful, yet dismissive, sigh in her voice. Chloe, still meticulously dissecting her veal, chimed in next, her voice sweet as saccharin. "So, Olivia, do you have a little team now? Or are you still, doing it all solo from your apartment?" Ethelred Systems currently employed over 3,200 brilliant minds across 3 continents, with a new research facility opening in Tokyo next quarter. We were, in fact, in the final stages of preparing a comprehensive proposal for a major GHI initiative. But I kept my response deliberately simple, almost monosyllabic. "No, Chloe. I have help." Julian's smirk widened, curling at the edges with something akin to pity. "Well, eventually, everyone needs to find a real career, don't they?" The laughter that followed was soft, a delicate, polished sound, yet it cut with surgical precision. Mom, ever the diplomat when it suited her, intervened, her voice a soothing balm of feigned understanding. Now, Julian. Olivia has always carved her own unique path." That word again, unique. Synonymous in their vocabulary with different, outlier, other. Not one of us. Julian raised his glass again, his expression one of mock magnanimity. To the rebels in the family, he declared, his eyes glinting. May they eventually find their way back to sensible pursuits before it's entirely too late. I didn't lift my glass. Instead, I found myself looking down at my grandmother's watch, its steady ticking a quiet counterpoint to their noisy pronouncements. Still ticking. Still mine. Marcus, ever the opportunist, sensing a potential, albeit obscure, angle, leaned in again, his voice conspiratorial. You know, Liv, he said, using a nickname I'd always disliked. Harrington Capital is actually getting pretty serious about investing in niche tech startups. If you've got something, you know, a little project, you could always pitch it to us. He winked, a gesture meant to be encouraging but landed as deeply patronizing. Happy to give your little endeavor a shot. Little project? I repeated, my voice quiet but clear in a sudden lull in the conversation. I met his eyes directly, holding his gaze. It's not little, Marcus. He chuckled, a dismissive, slightly uncomfortable sound. Oh. Yeah. Feisty. Well, if it's so big, Olivia, then why haven't any of us heard of it? I let the silence stretch for a beat, a small pocket of stillness in the otherwise loud dining room. Then, I answered, my voice still quiet, yet carrying an undeniable weight. Maybe you just weren't listening. The table stilled. Even the clinking of silverware seemed to pause. Chloe let out a sharp, surprised little laugh, quickly stifled. Well, she exclaimed, her eyes wide. She certainly has developed a bit of a bite, hasn't she? Mom chuckled, a dry, rustling sound, as she reached to gracefully top off someone's wine glass. Oh, we're just teasing you, darling, she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. It's all in good family fun, isn't it? But it wasn't fun, not for me. It never had been. They just hadn't ever bothered to notice. Or perhaps, they simply hadn't cared. Dessert arrived, exquisite little fig tartlets drizzled with lavender honey and a dollop of fresh, thick cream. Chloe's favorite, no doubt. I didn't touch mine. Julian was midway through a convoluted story about taking depositions in a steamy Miami conference room when a soft, almost imperceptible knock echoed from the grand entryway. A moment later, Amelia Hayes, my executive assistant, appeared in the dining room archway. She was the epitome of quiet efficiency and understated professionalism. Amelia never wore black unless the occasion specifically, and usually somberly, demanded it. Tonight, she wore an impeccably tailored black suit. She approached our table with steady, unhurried steps, seemingly oblivious to the startled, questioning glances from my family. She leaned down beside me, her presence a calm, reassuring anchor in the turbulent waters of the Vance family dinner. I'm very sorry to interrupt, Ms. Vance, Amelia said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, yet perfectly audible to me. But the Bombardier Global 7500 is fully prepped and ready for departure to Geneva. The pilot is requesting final confirmation for the flight plan to the Global Health Initiative headquarters. They'll need to file it with air traffic control within the hour to ensure our scheduled arrival for the signing ceremony with Dr. Armitage and the FMA director. The ornate silver fork slipped from Chloe's manicured fingers. It clattered onto her bone china dessert plate with a sharp, discordant ring that seemed to reverberate through the suddenly silent room. I didn't flinch. I simply reached for my heavy linen napkin. Thank you, Amelia, I said, my voice calm and even. Please inform Captain Reyes that we will proceed as scheduled. We'll make the planned stopover in San Francisco for the Ethelred board vote regarding the new FMA collaboration. I'll join that call en route from Geneva. Amelia nodded once, a small, precise movement. Very good, Ms. Vance. She turned and exited the dining room as quietly and unobtrusively as she had entered, leaving a profound, echoing silence in her wake. Not an awkward silence, not a confused silence. This was a dead silence. The kind that settles like a fine layer of dust after something fragile and long-held has irrevocably shattered. Marcus blinked slowly, his mouth slightly agape, the earlier bravado completely gone. Julian's jaw muscle twitched, a tiny, betraying tick. Mom sat bolt upright, her posture suddenly rigid as if impeccable deportment alone could anchor her to a reality that was rapidly, and bewilderingly, slipping from her grasp. A jet? Julian finally managed to stammer, the words sounding foreign and hesitant on his usually glib tongue. I dabbed the corner of my mouth delicately with the napkin, a gesture of pure, unadulterated composure I didn't entirely feel but projected flawlessly. Yes, Julian, I replied, my tone matter of fact. A Bombardier Global 7500, to be precise. We find it's rather efficient for intercontinental meetings and critical contract negotiations. Ethelred Systems closed a significant partnership in Geneva with the GHI last quarter, and this new FMA collaboration is vital. Ethelred Systems? Marcus echoed, his voice a confused murmur, the name sounding unfamiliar, alien. My company, I said simply, offering no further embellishment. Mom's eyes, usually so adept at conveying disdain, now narrowed with a mixture of disbelief and dawning, unwelcome comprehension. You have a company jet, Olivia, she asked, her voice thin, almost reedy. I have a company, Mom, I corrected gently, but firmly. Ethelred Systems. The jet is merely a tool, an efficient means to an end. Julian attempted a laugh, but it emerged as a dry, choked sound, more a gasp than amusement. So, what exactly are you trying to tell us, Olivia, he blustered, a hint of his old arrogance struggling to resurface. That you're running some kind of actual, legitimate operation? I reached into my simple handbag, retrieved my phone, and with a few swift taps, opened the HealthTech Chronicle app. Here, I said, my voice devoid of triumph, just a quiet statement of fact, as I slid the phone across the polished mahogany table toward him. The screen glowed with the top headline, Ethelred Systems, AI Medical Diagnosis Makes Historic Breakthrough. $1.5 billion global health initiative contract poised to revolutionize healthcare access and bridge global medical gaps. My photograph, taken during a keynote speech at an international medical conference in Vienna, was featured prominently beneath the headline. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes wide, his earlier condescension vanished. Is that you, Olivia? He breathed, pointing a trembling finger at the screen. I nodded once. No flourish, no grand explanation. Just a simple affirmation. Mom reached for the phone, her hand hovering over it for a moment before retreating as if the device itself might burn her. I watched her hands, usually so steady, tremble almost imperceptibly. Why? Olivia, why didn't you ever tell us any of this? She finally asked, her voice a fragile whisper, stripped of its usual authority. Would it have mattered if I had, Mom? I asked, my own voice quiet, but weighted with years of unspoken truths. Did you ever truly try to listen? The room remained utterly still. No one reached for their untouched fig tartlets. Even the air in the opulent dining room seemed to hesitate, thick with unspoken recriminations and dawning, uncomfortable realizations. I glanced down at my grandmother's watch. Still ticking. Still mine. Julian was the first to break the spell, or rather, to attempt to challenge the undeniable reality now confronting them. His voice had that familiar, sharp edge, the one he undoubtedly used in court when backed into a corner, trying to discredit irrefutable evidence. He pointed a stiff, accusatory finger at my phone, still glowing on the table. That article, it could be exaggerated, he declared, though his conviction wavered. The media often inflates these things. I looked at him, my head tilted slightly, a calm, unwavering gaze. You believe HealthTech Chronicle, a leading global journal in medical technology, routinely inflates the details of multi-billion-dollar contracts with the Global Health Initiative and federal agencies like the FMA, Julian? He didn't answer, his gaze falling away, a flush creeping up his neck. Across the table, Marcus was still staring at the phone, his lips moving silently as he absorbed each detail of the article, as if rereading the words might somehow alter their staggering implications. I watched his face, a canvas of shifting emotions, as the numbers, the scope of Ethelred's global footprint, our contract values, the recent valuation, finally landed with their full impact. $8 billion, he murmured, the words sounding like they physically pained him to utter. The valuation, it says over $8 billion. No, Marcus, I said gently, correcting him without malice. That was the valuation from our last funding round. We crossed the $10 billion mark last month after the preliminary FMA agreement was announced. Chloe's hand, reaching unsteadily for her wine glass, trembled so violently that she missed, her fingers brushing against the cool crystal with a faint, nervous tap. Mom still hadn't spoken another word. She was sitting even straighter now, if that were possible, her spine a rod of iron. As if sheer willpower could maintain some semblance of control in a world that had just been irrevocably upended. Her eyes remained fixed on the polished surface of the table, on the empty space where my phone had rested moments before. Then, she asked, her voice so soft it was almost inaudible, You built all of this, alone, Olivia? Not entirely alone, Mom, I replied, my voice equally quiet. I had a great team, dedicated investors, and mentors who believed in me. Just not with any of you. Julian let out a dry, brittle laugh, a sound devoid of any genuine humor, forced and fragile. He began to stammer something about family, about how I should have told them, how they could have helped, how we were Vance's. And blood was thicker than water. But I remembered, with crystal clarity, a conversation he'd had with Dad when I was about 25, a hushed, serious discussion in Dad's study that I'd accidentally overheard. Julian had called my fledgling startup idea a potential embarrassment and a liability to the pristine Vance name, and had strongly advised Dad to ensure my little hobby was kept discreetly off the annual family Christmas newsletter. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I simply told him, my gaze steady, you once advised Dad that my endeavors were bad for the Vance brand, Julian. I listened very carefully to that advice. Mom finally looked up, her eyes glistening with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. Was it regret, or merely wounded pride? Families sometimes say things they don't truly mean, Olivia, she said, her voice pleading, almost desperate. I reached into my wallet and retrieved a single, folded piece of paper. It was creased from years of being carried, but carefully preserved. I slid it across the gleaming table toward her. Her own letter, from all those years ago. Typed. Signed. Unmistakably, chillingly cold. You told me, Mom, I reminded her gently, and I quote, please refrain from associating the Vance name with any venture that may not endure. You also said, we trust you will exercise discretion. She didn't touch the letter. She just stared at it as if it were a venomous snake. Marcus, ever the opportunist, leaned in again, his earlier shock now replaced by a sudden, almost frantic eagerness. He launched into a rapid-fire monologue about how Harrington Capital was aggressively expanding its portfolio in the health tech sector, mentioning potential synergies, collaborative ventures, access to networks, infusions of capital. I let him finish his breathless pitch, then said, very simply, Ethelred Systems is not currently seeking new investment, Marcus. We're fully capitalized for the next 5 years. Chloe jumped in next, her voice trembling slightly, attempting to smooth over the rapidly fracturing facade of family unity. Oh, Olivia, she gushed, her eyes wide and earnest, if only we had known. If we had truly understood the scale of what you were doing, maybe things could have been different. Perhaps we could have supported you more. I looked at her, not with anger, but with a profound, bone-deep weariness. Things were different, Chloe, I said, my voice flat. They were always different. Just never different for me, in your eyes. Mom finally reached a hesitant hand toward the letter, her fingers hovering just above the aged paper. I watched her, a strange pang of something almost like pity stirring within me. She hesitated, not, I suspected, because of the woman I had become, but because touching that letter, acknowledging its physical presence, meant admitting to herself, and to us, that she had indeed written those cold, dismissive words. That she had been so spectacularly, devastatingly wrong. My phone buzzed discreetly in my handbag. Amelia. Always on time. Always precise. I stood up slowly, carefully folded my untouched linen napkin, and placed it neatly beside my untouched dessert. I have a critical Ethelred Systems board vote in approximately 6 hours, conducted via secure video link from the jet. I announced calmly to the stunned silence. We're finalizing the terms for a new initiative with the Federal Medical Agency, a project with significant national implications. I turned to leave. Mom's voice, sharp and strained, caught me at the doorway. Why, Olivia? Why come here tonight at all? After all this, why? I paused, my back still to them, the weight of their collective gaze almost palpable. Then, I said, my voice clear and steady, I came to see if anything had changed. I turned then, to face them one last time, my expression unreadable. It hasn't. I stepped out into the grand hallway. Behind me, the opulent dining room seemed to hold its breath, a stage frozen in tableau after the final curtain has fallen. The actors still unsure of their next move, their next line. Then, the scramble began, predictably. Julian was first, ever the quickest to pivot when self-interest was at stake. "Olivia, wait," he called out, his voice urgent, almost pleading, as he hurried after me. "Perhaps we should discuss investments strategically. If Ethelred Systems is expanding at this rate, there could be significant alignment. A mutually beneficial strategic partnership with Whitman and Sterling's M&A division." I turned halfway, just enough for him to see the cool, appraising look on my face. "You mean now that you finally believe Ethelred Systems actually exists, Julian?" He had the grace to flush, saying nothing. Marcus followed close behind, his usual bluster replaced by an almost comical obsequiousness. "Hey, Liv. Olivia. Listen, I always believed in you. I mean, I always knew you were incredibly smart, a real brainiac," he stammered, tripping slightly on the expensive Persian runner. I just didn't realize." He trailed off, flustered. "You didn't realize I stopped needing your approval, or anyone else's in this family, many, many years ago, Marcus," I finished for him, my voice devoid of inflection. Chloe appeared next, offering a small, tremulous smile, a carefully polished and practiced expression of belated support. "Olivia, if Ethelred Systems is ever hiring," she began, her voice breathy, "I've actually been exploring career opportunities in tech-adjacent fields myself. Project management, perhaps, or corporate communications." I looked at her for a long moment, a flicker of an old memory surfacing. She used to laugh, a light, tinkling sound, whenever I tried, in my younger, more naive days, to explain the complex algorithms I was working on. She once told a mutual acquaintance, with a dismissive wave of her hand, that I just worked with screens all day. "Can you name a single programming language, Chloe?" I asked, my tone neutral. Her mouth opened, then closed. A blank look crossed her face. She looked away, a faint blush staining her cheeks. And then, at last, Mom rose from her chair at the head of the devastated dining table. She walked toward me slowly, each step measured, more about maintaining an illusion of control than any display of maternal grace. "You're angry, Olivia," she said, her voice low and steady, though I could detect the tremor beneath it. "And I suppose I can understand that. But please, don't let pride, misplaced pride, close doors that your family can help keep open for you." That word again, family. The one they wielded like a weapon or a shield, depending on their needs. "You had more than a decade, Mom, to open any door for me," I said, my voice quiet but unyielding. "You, all of you, chose to paint them shut, bolt them, and then pretend they were never there." Mom's voice softened then, taking on an almost maternal, pleading tone that grated on my nerves. "But you're still a Vance, Olivia. No matter what. That name still means something. It has to. It means everything to you, Mom," I said, the truth of it hanging heavy in the air between us. "And it means absolutely nothing to the world I built for myself, brick by painstaking brick." She flinched, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement, but I saw it. The carefully constructed dam of her composure was cracking. She reached out a hand, as if by instinct, to touch my arm, perhaps to pull me back into the fold, to reassert her maternal authority. I stepped back, just out of her reach. "Don't, Mom," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "This isn't a fight. There's nothing left to fight about. This is simply a line drawn a long time ago. One you're only just now seeing." My phone buzzed again in my handbag. "Amelia. Time to go." I pulled on my simple, elegant coat. No rush, no unnecessary drama. Just a quiet, unshakable finality. As I reached the massive front door, I turned one last time, not to them, but to the house itself, to its oppressive stillness, its suffocating weight of expectation and disappointment. "You always thought I left, truly left in spirit, all those years ago because I had somehow failed by your standards," I said, my voice resonating softly in the cavernous entryway. "But the truth is, I left because I finally, truly, understood that I didn't need to pass your arbitrary tests anymore. I decided to make my own rules, build my own world, and define my own success. Then I opened the door. Outside, the sleek black car waited, its engine a low, discreet hum, the driver already standing attentively beside the open rear door. The night air was crisp and cold, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, standing on the Vance's doorstep, it didn't reach me, didn't chill me to the bone. The wind caught the edge of my coat as I stepped out from under the imposing portico. The interior of the car was already comfortably warm. The driver, chosen by Amelia for his efficiency, invisibility, and precision, nodded respectfully and took my small handbag without a word. Behind me, I could hear the faint creak of the heavy front door. It didn't close. They were still watching. Of course, they were. Families like mine, I'd come to realize, often only recognize the value of something, or someone, once they've irrevocably lost it. They only know how to chase what they've already let slip through their careless fingers. I slid into the plush leather back seat, the material cool and familiar against my skin. As the car pulled smoothly away from the Vance residence, its tires whispering on the gravel driveway, I didn't look back. Not once. Not at the imposing columns, not at the brightly lit windows, not at the people who had once measured my entire worth by where I sat at their dinner table, what labels I wore, or what car I drove. The silence inside the car was a different entity altogether from the suffocating silence I had left behind in that dining room. This silence wasn't tense with unspoken resentments or bristling with dawning shock. This silence was earned. It was peaceful. It was mine. I looked down at my grandmother's wristwatch. The minute hand clicked forward with quiet precision. Still ticking. Still mine. The next morning, Saturday, the messages began to arrive, a predictable deluge. A LinkedIn connection request from Chloe, accompanied by a cloyingly sweet message about reconnecting as family and successful women. A lengthy voicemail from Julian, his tone a jarring mix of forced bonhomie and barely concealed desperation. Olivia, we absolutely must reconnect. There's incredible family synergy to be explored here. Real value on the table for Ethelred and WNS. A long, rambling, and overly effusive email from Marcus, filled with buzzwords about collaborative innovation, disruptive tech, and the untapped potential of the Vance-Thorne Alliance in the healthcare investment space. And from Mom, a handwritten note, delivered by special courier. Expensive, heavy cream-colored paper, her elegant script edged with what I could only interpret as a potent combination of guilt and belated opportunistic pride. Olivia, my dearest daughter. We must find a way to rebuild. You have made us all so incredibly proud. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I calmly forwarded each message, each email, each notification to Amelia with a concise, two-word instruction: block. Archive. That evening, another delivery, this one orchestrated by me, arrived at the Vance residence in Greenwich. A single, unassuming box, no sender's name, no card. Inside, nestled on a bed of tissue paper, lay two items. First, a carefully preserved, though yellowed and creased, copy of my high school science fair application form. The project title, typed in youthful enthusiasm. A preliminary investigation into image recognition algorithms for the early detection of carcinomas. The application I had been forbidden by Mom to submit, because such unladylike pursuits were a waste of time, and I should have been helping Julian with his debate club preparations instead. Beside it, a small, plain white card. On it, a single, handwritten sentence in my own clear script. Sometimes, a seed of talent isn't merely overlooked or neglected, sometimes it is actively, deliberately, trampled underfoot. A second card lay beneath it, and yet, with the right soil, the right light, and enough resilience, it can still, eventually, find a way to bloom. I imagined the Health Tech Chronicle, the one Amelia had thoughtfully included in the package, its cover still bearing my face, slipping from Mom's trembling hands.